things I said from the very first is, why did they stop him in the first place? And what kind of charges could they possibly bring? And now we know that the stop, what they arrested him for was not even legal.
Based on what she says, even had Freddie Gray survived, she paints a picture of a pattern of behavior that is not acceptable for police officers. That is according to her at this stage right now. I have to ask, what do you think? It's been a mere few minutes right now. What do you think the reaction is going to be? There are several marches already planned for this afternoon. Is it going to be relief?
Well, I think there'll be relief, but at the same time, I think people will continue to demonstrate peacefully, because what this is showing the world is that this is something that is just not happening here in Baltimore. And you've seen the protests in Philadelphia, in New York, Denver, all around the nation, because unfortunately for Freddie, he becomes a symbol of what needs to take place in terms of the transition that police departments ought to be making. And one of the things I continue to advocate for is that we do psychological testing on these police officers who are in the streets, who become insensitized to our community and prejudge people in our neighborhoods, because we can't have these kinds of things continuing. And, again, this is just systemic of issues around the nation. And when you look in these communities, you can't prejudge the people, because I heard a gentleman on the air earlier talking about folks in the ghetto. You can't prejudge people because they live in a certain area. That does not mean that they're unlawful people.
Quickly, Sonny, a quick answer here. Was it too fast? I mean, there have been such a message of patience over the last few days. There will be people who said, well, hang on, if we were supposed to wait and let the process work its course, did she come to this decision too quickly?
No, I don't think so. And certainly people are going to say that, and they're going to be critical. It is very clear that she conducted an independent investigation, and her investigation was confirmed by the police department investigation, and she also has the report from the medical examiner. As a prosecutor, I often wonder why it takes months and months and months to come to a conclusion. If you are a good prosecutor, if you have a thorough investigation, and if you also trust your investigators, there is no need to have several months long investigation. I think if you look at the South Carolina case, that officer was charged very, very quickly.
All right, I want to get some reaction from the law enforcement community. Kate Baldwin is in New York for that. Kate.
John, thank you so much. We're going to continue our breaking news coverage and continue this conversation. Let me bring in our players, our analysts, our experts who we're going to be discussing this with. Here with me in studio, Mel Robbins, CNN legal analyst, as well as Tom Verney, former NYPD detective. Tom Fuentes is joining us from Washington, our CNN law enforcement analyst and former FBI assistant director. And I believe we also have Mark Lamont Hill, a CNN political commentator, host of HuffPost Live, joining us from Los Angeles. A lot to digest, everyone. Let's take this piece by piece. Mel, first to you. We've had the opportunity, while in that press conference, it came out quick, fast, and surprising, these charges against these officers. We've had a second, at least, to digest what they're now charged with. Let's talk about the most damning, the most serious of these charges and what that means. This most serious charge, as you've been telling me, is against Officer Goodson, the driver of the police van. Second-degree depraved murder. What does that mean?
Well, let's back it up just a minute and kind of put it all in context. Basically, what you typically have in every single state are first-degree murder, which means I intended to kill you, I planned it. That's usually, the most serious. Then you step it down a little bit. And interestingly, in Maryland, the way they define second-degree murder is they say it's when you're responsible for the murder of somebody else, but it's not first degree. So you didn't necessarily intend on it. You didn't pre-plan it. What you need to prove in this particular case is the fact, and she talked about it a lot, gross negligence, recklessness. His behavior was the direct result of Freddie Gray's death. This wasn't a heat of the passion kind of struggle. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional actions on this officer's part that resulted in gross negligence that was the direct cause of Freddie Gray's death. This is a very serious charge, and he could be sentenced, if convicted, to 30 years in prison.
And some of the quotes I remember hearing from the prosecutor: grossly negligent manner in how they handled Freddie Gray, no effort to assess his condition, no medical assistance rendered by any officer at any time. A lot of this now, Tom, focuses squarely on what happened in that police van. The prosecutor said several times that they didn't do really anything to to try to help this man when he was injured, even saying that they failed to put him in a seatbelt for at least the 5th time. And we're talking about Officer Goodson. Let's focus in on that for you. Police protocol. They were supposed to put him in a seatbelt. We heard that from the police commissioner. That was already wrong. What is your reaction when you hear how this prosecutor has laid out what happened? She says that his injury, his fatal injury, was the result of being handcuffed, shackled, and unsecured by a seatbelt while in this police van.
Right. Well, we knew early on that the officers clearly didn't follow protocol by seatbelting him in the back of the van. We knew that early on. We knew that there was some sort of an injury that took place probably as a result of that. So this just corroborates a lot of what we already knew. So the officers, at the minimum, because they didn't seatbelt him in and because they didn't get him medical attention in a timely manner, at the minimum, we're going to be facing departmental charges, if not criminal charges, because of that, right? So this now confirms that. But now we're also hearing about the fact that the actions of the officers have actually risen to having probable cause to arrest each and every one of them, and that's a problem. That, you know, we already had a situation here where the community already has this perception about the police that they are doing things illegally. But having said that, let's remember that the prosecutor is able to make these charges because of the investigation done by the Baltimore Police Department. So let's keep that in perspective.
And by her office. I mean, she was stunning in marching through. And that was the thing that was so surprising about this press conference is when can you ever remember seeing a prosecutor come out before a grand jury, before actually arresting the officers?
Because she had other options.
She did. But, you know, I think she handled this brilliantly because she literally let an avalanche of evidence and a very specific timeline. And we talked only about the second-degree murder, but the driver is also charged with 2 statutes that involve the driving of the van. There is a statute in Maryland, manslaughter by vehicle. That carries 10 years in prison, and they have to prove that he was grossly negligent in the way he operated the vehicle. They've also charged him with criminally negligent manslaughter, which is a different standard. It's a little lower. It's not gross negligence. It's whether or not he deviated from the standard practice of the police, which she clearly outlined in her indictment of these guys during the press conference and the sergeant. She also charged the sergeant. There was a moment in that press conference, and this is the moment that I leaned forward and said, oh my God, where she says that the officer, Sergeant Alicia White, is accused of opening up the back of that door. Now, this is in like the 3rd or 4th stop. This is the stop that she was talking about where he was unresponsive at that time, and she even put her hand on his head, and he was unresponsive, and they did not call for any medical attention. She has been charged with involuntary manslaughter, which is a gross negligence standard and carries 10 years in prison. And so those are the top line charges. The second-degree murder charge on the driver, the involuntary manslaughter charges related to the vehicle, and the involuntary manslaughter charges related to the conduct of 3 of these officers.
Amazing charges. A bombshell coming out from Baltimore from this city prosecutor. Let's get back to the ground. John Berman's on the ground really dissecting and trying to digest, as we all are, what we just learned. Just amazing the amount of detail that this prosecutor went into.
Thanks so much, Kate. You know, the state's attorney, Marilyn Mosby, announcing just moments ago to the youth of this city, I will seek justice on your behalf, and announcing a range of charges against 6 police officers, the highest being against Officer Cesar Goodson, the driver of that police van, who will be charged with second-degree depraved heart murder. Other officers will face involuntary manslaughter charges that deal with the issue of negligence as well. There's a tremendous amount of activity around here, both law enforcement and people just on the streets learning this information. A man with bullhorn not far from me chanting right now as well. I'm joined by CNN legal analyst Sunny Hostin here with me in front of City Hall. And Sunny, help me understand what second-degree depraved heart murder is. That is what the officer who was driving the truck will be charged with.
Yeah, I'm looking at the charges and the charging document now, and it's really interesting because second-degree depraved heart murder, the difference between second-degree murder and manslaughter is intent. And so the state's attorney's office is charging Cesar with intentionally murdering or killing Mr. Gray. That's difficult to prove.
It will be difficult to prove, and that is the most extreme charge, and there are a range of lesser charges that also carry serious jail time, up to 10 years or more. Sonny, hang on 1 second. I want to go to Renee Marsh right now, who I believe is on the streets and has someone with her for some reaction. Renee.
Well, I want to tell you that when we're in this intersection, from time to time, you're going to hear horns beeping, and that's what we've been hearing. People approving what they heard the state attorney say. One of the people out here who we know approves, Stephanie, come on in. I know you live in the area. Your initial reaction when you heard that all 6 officers, there is probable cause to charge them?
I was so happy. Tears of joy. That's what it is. Tears of joy. To see the city come together as one, and they came to actually get these 6 police at peace.
At any point, did you doubt that this would be the announcement that would be made by the state attorney's office?
Did.
Tell me about that.
I did. I didn't think the police were going to actually get what I thought it was going to be swept beneath the carpet like they always have been, and now justice has revealed. I'm happy. I'm very happy. You just don't know.
Now, we know that she says that she found probable cause to charge. Is your optimism equally as high that after the trial, they will be found guilty of those charges?
I believe, yeah, because you know what? Everybody beat these police up or did what they did to these police. We wouldn't even came this far.
All right, well, Stephanie, thank you so much. And again, Bourbon, I know you heard in the background there, and from time to time, all that beeping, people are happy to hear at least the first step here in which the state attorney has announced that there's enough probable cause to charge these 6 officers. John?
Renee, it was so interesting. You asked your guest if they expected this to happen. I was at an intersection not too far from where you were yesterday talking to a bunch of young here, and they absolutely did not expect this, and they certainly did not expect it soon. They are under the belief here, many people on the system is rigged against them, and they were saying that if it had been them, charges would have already been filed. You hear that so much on the streets. If this were me, charges would already be filed now. They have been filed. So, Renee, I'm wondering if you can show me the scene a little bit from where you are. I know law enforcement really started ramping up in the minutes before the state attorney's press conference. They obviously knew what was going on. They increased the security presence. Show me what's around you in terms of both security and in terms of the population on the streets.
Well, if you look just across the street here, and of course it's an intersection, so it may be difficult, but you'll see there is still a presence, but the shields are up. They look like they're in a much more relaxed mode, and I'm going to have my photographer just kind of turn a little bit more to your left so you can see the presence here to the left. So they are still here. However, they look a bit relaxed here. We also saw a couple of the members from the National Guard. They did leave shortly after. But again, there's still a presence here. I have to tell you, though, John, I spoke with another young man who said to me, look, this is great news. He was surprised at the fact that the state attorney announced that there is enough probable cause to charge these individuals. But he, unlike Stephanie we just heard from, he's not optimistic that in the end. See, take a listen. You hear that? That's what we hear in the intersection. And that's what we've been seeing minute after minute as the cars come through, because people are just excited. And many of them that I spoke to said they just did not expect this. They said, and in the words of a young man I just spoke to about 5 minutes ago, he expected the story to play out like how it's played out before, many times before, in which they did not think any charges or any probable cause would be filed against these officers. So they feel a bit victorious out here, but then there's the second half, and you can see they're in the middle there. introduce you to somebody here because I saw this woman right across the street. You were very energetic. What is your first name?
My name is Lisa. My last name is Mills, and I am totally excited. This is a statement not just for Baltimore, but for the United States of America. And I want to tell you, we got good police officers, and it's just those few bad officers. We don't want them here. We don't want them disrespecting the name of our police department. Okay? I'm so excited. It's tremendous.
I've been asking everybody this question. I mean, are you surprised at what the state attorney announced? Did you expect that this is what she was going to say?
Of course not. I'm not surprised at all. It was obvious just by the small amount of footage that we have seen so far that the police did not follow the orders the way that they should have. They did not follow procedures. They did not follow procedures. They did not.
Thank you so much.
Yes! Yes!
And if you look at this man, he's gotten very emotional here, John.
Go home. Get him out of here. We gave our lives for this country. And look at you. Is this what it's coming to, man? I love this fucking country too, just as much as you do. We fighting for a reason, man. I was willing to give my life for this country, man. Look at this community now, man. You're the same people I went to war with. Oh, man.
You tell me. I see that you're very emotional. You're very emotional. Tell me and explain to me where that's coming from.
This is crazy, man. They tell me we part of this country, man. How can we be? How can we be part of this country? Look at this, man.
But the state attorney just announced there's...
I heard that. I heard all that. It's the same script. Just a different time. See,
you don't believe charges in the end?
I don't believe anything until I see the end result. We got to stop being pacified. Every time they throw us a bone, they want us to calm down, man. We need to wait till the end result come in, man. But look, I was willing to give my life for this country. Look at my community, man. Look around here. The same people who we go to war with coming to war on us. When I was in the Marine Corps, they called me a patriot, a Marine. But now that I'm fighting for my people, they call me a fucking thug. No, I'm not sweetening nothing up. They call me a thug when I fight for my people.
So it sounds like you're not satisfied with the state attorney's announcement.
Look around. Would you be satisfied? Look around right here. Would you be satisfied with this if it was your community? And I don't even live around here.
You know?
I live in Belvedere Square.
You need to go to Belvedere Square.
No, these my people. No, you don't tell me where to go, man. I have family. I have family here.
Man, I'm a victim and everything else.
I'm a victim as well.
You been beat?
You want me to show you how many times?
All right.
You want to show me how many times? No, man. This ain't about you and I, man.
It ain't.
Then look around there.
It's all peace and loving everybody, man.
All right, John, so you can see there's a combination of emotions here. People who are happy with the verdict of what the state attorney had to say, and some people who are just not satisfied because this is just the beginning. Obviously, this has not gone to trial yet. But in this intersection, a mix of emotions at this point.
That's a great way to put it, Renee. A mix of emotions. There's a palpable buzz here right now in Baltimore, and it's not just the helicopters that are all flying overhead to get the aerial images on the streets. There are people with bullhorns. There are people with whistles. There are people honking their car horns as they drive, and they are learning this news that charges will be filed against 6 police officers in the death of Freddie Gray, ranging all the way to second-degree depraved heart murder against Officer Caesar Goodson. He was the officer driving the van when Freddie Gray, so says the state's prosecutor, banged his head or had his head banged up against the back of that van, causing that spinal cord injury, which ultimately led to his death. I'm joined right now by Bishop Walter Scott Thomas, the preacher at the New Psalmist Baptist Church. It is one of the largest churches here, I believe, in the city of Baltimore. And I have to say, and this is so important, over the last several days, there has been so much work in this community to keep things calm and to keep things peaceful. We've seen it from the clergy. We've seen it from elected officials. We've seen it from law enforcement as well, and it has largely been successful since the riot broke out on Monday. What do you think the reaction will be today as we go forward, and what do you intend to bring to the community as a message?
I think this is one of the most positive days we've seen in my lifetime. I think the community is going to be excited by this news. From the young people on up, there will be those who will have expected more, but the reason they will expect more is because the problems are so great. But for the majority of persons in this city, this is an unbelievable and unprecedented activity. The state's attorney charged people today, and that was not something anyone was expecting.
I think you're right. And we're also here with legal analyst Sonny Hostin, and I should say, I've been out there talking to the same people you have, and no, people certainly did not expect this, at least not today. They did not expect it. We heard a man talking to Renee Marsh, a very frustrated man who still doesn't trust the system, but this is the legal process at work, working the way that I know people in the clergy here have been frustrated that it hasn't been working in the past. Look, these officers may not be convicted. They'll face a jury.
But they started. The process has started. It was, to be very candid with you, we were very nervous Wednesday night. Wednesday night, we were afraid it was going to be bad today. So the pastors do what pastors do. We called the city to pray. And we called all of our friends across the country. We had a prayer network going from Alaska to California to Florida to Maine and everything in between. Churches everywhere at 7 o'clock last night praying, because we were worried about what would happen. And we asked God. That's what we do. We work in community, but we serve God. And we knew that only God could fix the problem here. Did we expect something this monumental? No. Did we expect to hear the state's attorney give down indictments? No. But are we excited about it? Absolutely. This calms a lot in our city. Our young people have never seen a victory. Many of them who we see are 17 and 18, they came to their teenage years with Trayvon Martin. They've seen one defeat, and they've seen one person after another killed, and nothing happened.
You call this a victory. I want to make clear. You're not calling the riots, the violence that broke out on Monday a victory. No, the victory is in the work that was done since then. The victory is in the process here in the city of Baltimore with elected officials, with this 35-year-old elected state's attorney who's following the law, correct?
You see, the process gets the victory today. All of us tell young people and tell everybody, trust the process, trust the process, trust the process. They throw back in our faces, you can't trust the process. And today we saw it work.
And I want to say also that I've been speaking to a lot of young people since I've been here back in Baltimore, and many young people were believing that these officers would not be charged, that they had no belief in the justice system. And as a prosecutor, as a lawyer, that was so hurtful to me. And they were saying our lives don't matter. So Freddie Gray's life won't matter. I think with this prosecutor coming forward and indicting the officers, even if there isn't a conviction, the notion now is that his life mattered enough for these officers to be held accountable and for the process to begin.
And that's the key, for the process to begin. We've never seen the process begin. And now we get to see it begin. Our youngsters, this is new to them. I mean, it's going to take them a while to digest what this even means. And they will now watch what the process looks like, how it goes step by step. They will learn. I'm 65. I was alive and a teenager. I was in college when the riots hit Baltimore in '68. When we were the ones saying Black lives didn't matter. I was in college. I wasn't in Baltimore. But we were the generation of Franz Fanon, Soul on Ice, when we were saying Black lives don't matter.
You're 65 years old. First of all, you look much younger than that. Let's stipulate that, first of all. But you've seen a lot. I have to say, to me, you seem very surprised today. You seem flat out stunned by what happened today.
Yes.
What made the difference?
I'm a pastor and a preacher. I have to give credit to God. What else can you give credit to for this? No station was reporting before she spoke. In fact, I had CNN in my ear while I was standing down there with just 7-second delay. And I had heard the person talk about downplaying expectations, which was the normal and the right thing to do. No one expected this. This is such a blast out of the unusual. that you have to credit it to someone who has unusual power.
Bishop Sonny, stand by for a minute again. The news out of Baltimore today, charges being filed against 6 police officers. Now the death of Freddie Gray deemed a homicide. Very emotional time here in this city, and as we've been on the air for the last few minutes, you have heard some language, some salty language. You know what? It's understandable at times like this. We're sorry that it got on the air, but there are bigger things at play here than some swear words. We have much more coverage to come from Baltimore and the reaction to this remarkable news. Stay with us.
On May the 7th, the United Kingdom goes to the polls. Join me, Max Foster, Christiane Amanpour, Richard Kress and Hala Garani for complete coverage of the 2015 UK elections on CNN.
The most amazing places I've been to in the Middle East aren't those you can walk or drive to. They are in the eyes of the first Arab woman fighter pilot breaking down barriers at supersonic speed, in the smile of a young UAE student determined to shed stereotypes and make her way in the world. These are places you'll find hope, joy and inspiration.
I'm John Berman, live in front of Baltimore City Hall. The breaking news out of Baltimore about 30 minutes ago. State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby announced, she said that to the youth of this city, I will seek justice on your behalf. That justice coming from the state's attorney. She is pressing charges against 6 police officers. She has deemed the death of Freddie Gray more than 10 days ago to be a homicide. Charges being filed against those 6 officers ranging as high as depraved heart murder. Those charges being filed against Officer Cesar Goodson, who was driving the police van in which Freddie Gray sustained the injuries to his spinal cord, allegedly, that ultimately led to his death. I'm joined now by CNN commentator Mark Lamont Hill, who joins me now from Los Angeles. And Mark, we've talked so many times about the issues that are affecting this city, and they're affecting cities all across the country right now. I can tell you the reaction here to this news today, that charges are being filed, very emotional on the streets here. There are people on bullhorns, there are whistles being blown here, car horns being blown. What's your reaction?
My reaction is one of surprise and measured satisfaction. You know, I'm out here in Los Angeles, and I've been talking to people for the last 3 days on the ground, and everyone thought Friday was going to be a big day, and many of the activists out here were saying to people, hey, manage your expectations. There probably won't be any bad news on Friday, but there likely won't be any good news either. So when that presser happened and that news came out, people were literally cheering in the streets here too. It's a testimony to people's faith or lack of faith in the system, appropriately so in many ways, that they thought nothing was good was going to come from this press conference, and instead they got something they didn't expect. I also think it's important that she outlined each step of that drive that Freddie Gray was on, because it really speaks to the experiences of black men and women every single day, oftentimes getting picked up for no reason, getting charged or getting handcuffed with no charges, getting the rough ride in the van. These are things that often get swept under the rug, so it's important that those things got laid out, and we have to give Ms. Mosby a considerable amount of credit here. She stood up to law enforcement. She stood up to police. Oftentimes, state prosecutors stay in the same side of the fence, on the same side of the fence as law enforcement. She did not do that. She stood up. She was courageous. She laid those charges out. And lastly, I have to say to the community, the protests that happened from day one are partly what led to this. That's what put a spotlight on this case. That's what led to more information to come out. That's what led to more video to come out. It's what led people to give appropriate statements. The protests of the last 10 days are exactly why we're in the place that we are. This speaks to the power of why we fight.
It's interesting you point out that the state prosecutor stood up to the police here. A lot of the information, at least some of the information we were given initially, Mark, has turned out not to be true. Initially, we were told that Freddie Gray had a switchblade. That's why he was ultimately arrested after he was chased by police. He did not have a switchblade, the evidence shows, according to the state's prosecutor. He had a completely legal knife. There was no cause to arrest him in the first place. And then, even had he not died, Mark, as a result of injuries suffered in the back of the van, the behavior, she says, of those officers was at a minimum negligent, if not much, much worse. He was asking repeatedly for assistance, medical assistance. That assistance was not rendered. They observed him to need assistance and nevertheless did not get him what he needed right there. You say the protests over the last 10 days have made a difference here. But Mark, it's more really than the last 10 days. The spotlight has been on this issue for some time now.
No, absolutely, and you're absolutely right. And that's why earlier in the week I made a point to call these uprisings, because it's not an isolated incident. There's a politics behind this. There's a level of organization behind this. And there's a profound frustration by black and brown people in this country and white citizens at this point that law enforcement has overstepped its bounds, that the ritual of policing in America needs to be changed, that the practice of policing needs to be changed, that we need wholesale criminal justice reform at the very least in this nation. And so the national spotlight was on Baltimore, and it led to something I think that might be good. But again, we also can't celebrate too early. This wouldn't be the first time we've seen people charged and then ultimately not convicted because of some malfunction with the jury, some sort of prosecutorial error, some sort of misjudgment, sometimes a rogue jury. All sorts of things could happen. So while I'm happy that we moved this far, I'm also very measured in my satisfaction, as I said earlier. But yeah, absolutely, this is a nationwide conversation.
Mark Lamont Hill, measured satisfaction. You know, it should be noted that some of the reaction we've heard on the streets is they're grateful to some of law enforcement for their behavior over the last several days, for helping keep the peace after the violence that broke out on Monday. And one of the reasons you hear people satisfied that these charges have been pressed, no one's been convicted yet, but charges are being filed right now, is it puts blame on what people consider to be bad practices by officers and doesn't condemn every police officer. And I think that's important to note here. I want to bring in Joe Johns. Joe is standing by at a police staging area. You know, there are marches planned for later today. There are big protests planned for this weekend. And before this news was announced just a short time ago, there was some concern in the community here that these protests could take a bad turn over the coming days. Joe.
Yeah, there was a lot of concern, especially on Saturday, when the very same group that held a protest last Saturday and brought huge numbers of people was planning another one for tomorrow. So there were some concerns there, but let me tell you what I'm finding out. I've been reaching out for reaction around the city on the announcement by Marilyn Mosby. I've been told that the mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, will be scheduling a news conference around 1 o'clock Eastern time here in the city. And it also appears that she's going to try to take control of the message that has really gotten out of control in many ways for the Baltimore city government. She's been criticized by officials and individuals who are familiar with how city governments work around the country, that she wasn't aggressively in control of the message. So we're told to expect a news conference and to hear from her around 1 o'clock Eastern time here in the city. Also spoke to Congressman Elijah Cummings of Maryland. That's the congressman who's been walking around the city, marching with some of the protesters, but also very aggressively trying to keep the peace. And he essentially told me that he was very pleased with the fact that, in his view, Marilyn Mosby looked very closely at the evidence, gave it a very thorough look. He said he believes in her integrity, he believes in her pursuit of excellence and justice. And so he is also expected to show up around City Hall probably within the hour as more and more people who have been players in this drama that's been seen around the world now start to react to the news that charges are being filed in the case. John, back to you.
Yeah, I have to say, there's nothing less than excitement here in many quarters that the process has played out this way. Again, these 6 officers not convicted of anything, but they will be charged, and many people here in this city see that as the process working, or as they would say, finally working. There is so much more to discuss, including what will happen over the next several hours. School will be letting out soon. So many students who were part of some of the unrest here on Monday, they will be getting this news for the first time and going home. What will happen then? We're going to speak to some people here who've been working with the community, so stay with us.
Thinking of banking in Africa? Think Zenith. Zenith Bank PLC is one of the biggest banks in Africa, with about 1 million shareholders and over 300 business offices in Nigeria and subsidiaries in other African countries and the United Kingdom. Committed to the best possible customer experience. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
Sorry I'm late. I was working on my intelligent home system. It lets you turn on your washing machine and set your heating remotely. It's amazing.
We could have at least come up with an intelligent excuse.
You'll soon be able to fly on a fully electric plane, and I'm helping to make it possible.
Wow. Oh, and did you remember to change the light bulb in the lounge?
EDF continues to support progress today through the EDF Pulse Awards. Give pioneers your support too by voting for your favorite project at pulse.edf.com.
All right, John Berman here in Baltimore. The breaking news in this city. The state's attorney announced just a short time ago she has deemed the death of Freddie Gray to be a homicide and is filing charges against the 6 police officers involved, she says, in his death. Let me lay out these charges for you right now. For Officer Caesar Goodson, the man driving the police van, second-degree depraved heart murder, involuntary manslaughter, and second-degree negligent assault. Then, for Officer William Porter, he faces involuntary manslaughter, assault in the second degree, misconduct in office. Those are just some of the charges. Then also, Lieutenant Brian Rice, who was charged with involuntary manslaughter. You guys got to keep moving this more fastly. Assault in the second degree, misconduct in office, false imprisonment. Officer Edward Nero faces intentional assault in the second degree negligent misconduct in office, false imprisonment. There is also Officer Garrett Miller, who is charged with intentional assault in the second degree, assault in the second degree, negligent misconduct, false imprisonment, and finally, Alicia White, involuntary manslaughter, assault in the second degree, and misconduct in office. That is a wide array of charges against 6 police officers. The most is second-degree depraved heart murder against Officer Goodson, and that carries 30 years, a maximum 30-year sentence in prison if convicted of that charge. I'm joined right now by Jay Johnson, who is the national organizer of BlackLivesMatter.com. Jay, you were with Marilyn Mosby in the moments before she made this dramatic announcement. She did not tell you what she was going to say. You did not know what her decision would be, but describe to me what it was like to be with her before and then as she made that announcement.
Let me clarify something first. Official BlackLivesMatter.com is different than BlackLivesMatter.com. We're focused on what happened here today, which is police brutality. In the moments before those announcements were made, there was a very tense atmosphere because everyone is looking to see whether or not this is going to reverberate across the nation, because the people thought they had a case. The people did have a case. When she came out and made that announcement, you could have seen it like a tidal wave ripple across not only the faces of those folks who were the journalists and the correspondents, but those of us standing with her, those of us that she asked to pray before she even went out. There was a sense that what I'm about to deliver is not only going to be groundbreaking, but it is going to send a message to the people that we have heard you. And she said that, and she reiterated that. And I would say to all of the different factions across the country, all the different organizations, each and every person who thought that they had a voice in this matter, you were heard. So even though protests still go on, even though we now see the wheels of justice now turning, we know it's a long process, but the only thing that they were asking was that they begin to turn, and in turning they have. So when she announced this, you can imagine that all of us felt a sense of elation, but she gave no indication what was about to happen.
Is this proof to you that, at least in this case, to this system, that black lives do matter?
Well, in actuality, we've all heard it said, all lives matter. All lives have always mattered. But for some strange reason, the statistics prove, as in the Walter Scott case, as in the Eric Garner case, and so many other cases across the country, this is not the first, probably won't be the last, but at least we know that there's a sense of redress.
Well, what she also did was lay out some of the evidence here that she has. Not all of it. She told us she wasn't going to give us all, but she made the case. She explained to us why, in this case, she is filing charges.
Well, in actuality, what she also did was she cleared up a lot of speculation. She cleared up a lot of misinformation. She actually laid out the criminality of what actually happened. She showed probable cause. And then on top of that, she then proceeded to say, I've issued a warrant. Therefore, the people collectively of the United States that have lost trust in law enforcement, that have lost trust in the judicial system, now feel that if they voice their voice loud enough, which is their constitutional right, as they've done across many cities yesterday, and now they can do this again today, to say that you hear us and that the system will respond.
So now what? Now what? There were 3 demonstrations planned for this afternoon. There's a big march planned for tomorrow. What do you want to see on the streets of Baltimore now?
One thing and one thing only. Continue to raise awareness to the issue, but celebrate. Celebrate the victory that at this time you have made the judicial and the police force hear you. That now you can begin the dialogue. We can celebrate by raising our hands to sing. We can celebrate by marching in a mass. This is not the NBA double or the Final Four. We don't have to burn stuff and turn stuff over. But what we can do is continue to show that the people have always had the power. That's what the Constitution was built on. So those protests, still protesting those issues that are still pending in other cities, Baltimore has led the way. Baltimore has made an example. So those protests should be celebratory right now.
Sonny Hostin, Kate Baldwin along with me in New York. There is so much more of our breaking news coverage. Freddie Gray, his death deemed a homicide, charges filed against 6 police officers. More news right after this.
I'm Amanda Davis in London, and this is CNN.
Sing with your hearts out, let's light up the whole town. Voices will carry to everyone that's all around.
With CNN's On the Road, you've explored some of the world's most incredible places. Where will we go next?
My voice, my story,
my life. In South Africa.
In Kenya. South Sudan.
Hear Africa's voices.
A way of understanding the world.
A door to the soul.
In Africa. In Africa.
In Africa.
CNN African Voices.
My name is Msafiri Zawose. I'm a traditional Tanzanian musician. Hear my story.
African Voices. Sunday on CNN. In association with Glow.
I'm Will Ripley in Tokyo, and this is CNN.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ashley Banfield. I want to welcome our CNN viewers here in the United States and from around the world as well. I'm coming to you live today from Baltimore in front of the City Hall. Listen, this has been a heck of a day. A lot of surprises coming out of this city 19 days after the arrest of Freddie Gray simply for making eye contact with a police officer on a bicycle. 12 days after Mr. Gray has passed away from the broken neck that he suffered in the back of a police van, all 6 of the officers who were involved in that takedown and in the transportation of that 25-year-old previously healthy Baltimore man are now facing arrests. The warrants went out. Whether they're in custody, we do not know that yet, but those charges range from misconduct to second-degree murder. And you could feel this city holding its collective breath as the state's attorney, Marilyn Mosby, stepped out 90 minutes ago and declared Gray's arrest was unlawful, that his untimely death was a homicide. I want you to hear now how Baltimore's newly elected prosecutor, herself a daughter and a granddaughter of police officers, laid out the grisly narrative that led to this moment.
On April 12, 2015, between 8:45 and 9:15 a.m., near the corner of North Avenue and Mount Street, Lieutenant Brian Rice of the Baltimore Police Department, while on bike patrol with officers Garrett Miller and Edward Nero, made eye contact with Mr. Freddie Carlos Gray Jr. Having made eye contact with Mr. Gray subsequently ran from Lieutenant Rice. Lieutenant Rice then dispatched over departmental radio that he was involved in a foot pursuit, at which time bike patrol officers Miller and Nero also began to pursue Mr. Gray. Having come in contact with the pursuing officers, Mr. Gray surrendered to officers Miller and Nero in the vicinity of the 1700 block of Pressbury Street. Officers Miller and Nero then handcuffed Mr. Gray and moved him to a location a few feet away from his surrendering location. Mr. Gray was then placed in a prone position with his arms handcuffed behind his back. It was at this time that Mr. Gray indicated that he could not breathe and requested an inhaler to no avail. Officers Miller and Nero then placed Mr. Gray in a seated position and subsequently found a knife clipped to the inside of his pants pocket. The blade of the knife was folded into the handle. The knife was not a switchblade and is lawful under Maryland law. These officers subsequently removed the knife and placed it on the sidewalk. Mr. Gray was then placed back down on his stomach, at which time Mr. Gray began to flail his legs and scream as Officer Miller placed Mr. Gray in a restraining technique known as a leg lace, while Officer Nero physically held him down against his will until a BPD wagon arrived to transport Mr. Gray. Lieutenant Rice, Officer Miller, and Officer Nero failed to establish probable cause for Mr. Gray's arrest as no crime had been committed by Mr. Gray. Accordingly, Lieutenant Rice, Officer Miller, and Officer Nero illegally arrested Mr. Gray. Upon arrival of the transport wagon driven by Officer Caesar Goodson, Lieutenant Rice, Officer Nero, and Officer Miller loaded Mr. Gray into the wagon, and at no point was he secured by a seatbelt while in the wagon, contrary to a BPD general order. Lieutenant Rice then directed BPD wagon to stop at Baker Street. At Baker Street, Lieutenant Rice, Officer Nero, and Officer Miller removed Mr. Gray from the wagon, placed flex cuffs on his wrists, placed leg shackles on his ankles, and completed required paperwork. Officer Miller, Officer Nero, and Lieutenant Rice then loaded Mr. Gray back into the wagon, placing him on his stomach, head first onto the floor of the wagon. Once again, Mr. Gray was not secured by a seatbelt in the wagon, contrary to a BPD general order. Lieutenant Rice then directed Officer Goodson to transport Mr. Gray to the Central Booking and Intake Facility. Following transport from Baker Street, Mr. Gray suffered a severe and critical neck injury as a result of being handcuffed, shackled by his feet, and unrestrained inside of the BPD wagon. From Baker Street, Officer Goodson proceeded to the vicinity of Mosher Street and Fremont Avenue, where he subsequently parked the wagon and proceeded to the back of the wagon in order to observe Mr. Gray. Despite stopping for the purpose of checking on Mr. Gray's condition, at no point did he seek nor did he render any medical assistance for Mr. Gray. Officer Goodson returned to his driver's seat and proceeded toward the Central Booking and Intake Facility with Mr. Gray still unsecured by a seatbelt, contrary to a BPD general order. Several blocks later, Officer Goodson called into dispatch that he needed to check on the status of his prisoner and requested additional units at Dolphin Street and Drew Hill Avenue. Officer William Porter arrived on the scene near Dolphin Street and Druid Hill Avenue. Both Officer Goodson and Officer Porter proceeded to the back of the wagon to check on the status of Mr. Gray's condition. Mr. Gray at that time requested help and indicated that he could not breathe. Officer Porter asked Mr. Gray if he needed a medic, at which time Mr. Gray indicated at least twice that he was in need of a medic. Officer Porter then physically assisted Mr. Gray from the floor of the van to the bench. However, despite Mr. Gray's appeal for a medic, both officers assessed Mr. Gray's condition, and at no point did either of them restrain Mr. Gray per BPD general order, nor did they render or request medical assistance. While discussing the transportation of Mr. Gray for medical attention, a request for additional units was made for an arrest at the 1600 West North Avenue. Officer Porter left the vicinity of Dolphin Street and Druid Hill Avenue to assist in the arrest of another prisoner at North Avenue. Despite Mr. Gray's obvious and recognized need for medical assistance, Officer Goodson, in a grossly negligent manner, chose to respond to the 1600 block of West North Avenue with Mr. Gray still unsecured by a seatbelt in the wagon without rendering to or summoning medical assistance from Mr. Gray. Officer Goodson arrived at North Avenue to transport the individual arrested at the location of North Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue, at which time he was again met by Officer Nero, Miller, Porter, and Lieutenant Rice. Once the wagon arrived, Officer Goodson walked to the back of the wagon and again opened the doors to the wagon to make observations of Mr. Gray. Sergeant Alicia White, Officer Porter, and Officer Goodson observed Mr. Gray unresponsive on the floor of the wagon. Sergeant White, who was responsible for investigating 2 citizen complaints pertaining to Mr. Gray's illegal arrest, spoke to the back of Mr. Gray's head. When he did not respond, she did nothing further, despite the fact that she was advised that he needed a medic. She made no effort to look or assess or determine his condition. Despite Mr. Gray's seriously deteriorating medical condition, no medical assistance was rendered or summoned for Mr. Gray at that time by any officer. After completing the North Avenue arrest and loading the additional prisoner into the opposite side of the wagon containing Mr. Gray, Officer Goodson then proceeded to the Western District Police Station, where, contrary to the BPD general order, he again failed to restrain Mr. Gray in the wagon for at least the 5th time. At the Western District Police Station, the defendant arrested at North Avenue was unloaded, escorted, and secured inside of the police station prior to attending to Mr. Gray. By the time Officer Zachary Novak, Sergeant White, and an unknown officer attempted to remove Mr. Gray from the wagon, Mr. Gray was no longer breathing at all. A medic was finally called to the scene, where upon arrival, the medic determined that Mr. Gray was now in cardiac arrest and was critically and severely injured. Mr. Gray was rushed to the University of Maryland Shock Trauma, where he underwent surgery. On April 19, 2015, Mr. Gray succumbed to his injuries and was...
I just want to break in, if I can, for a moment to the tape that we're running of Marilyn Mosby, because Congressman Elijah Cummings has just shown up here at our location. He's about to give a live news conference. So let's listen in as the Congressman addresses everyone here. Want me to hold this? Thank you. Good,
Good afternoon, everyone. This morning at 7 o'clock, I said on one of the national networks that I would trust whatever Marilyn Mosby did. I didn't know that a decision would be coming down today. And I said this morning that I believe in her integrity, her pursuit of excellence, the fact that she is an outstanding lawyer, and that she has been elected by the people of our great city. And I said that I believe that what she would do is she would take all the information she had already gathered and look at it very carefully. And if she thought that there was any additional information that was needed, that she knew that she had the full force of not only the Baltimore City Police Department, but of the federal government behind her. And the other thing that I said was this, that I believe with all my heart that she would take the facts, once she did all the research she needed to do, size it up with the law, and make the right decision. And I said this morning, before I knew any of this, that whatever her decision would be, because of her integrity and the fact that I believe in her, that I would accept that decision. But I said something else. And I said this at Freddie Gray's funeral. I said, you know, did you see him? Did anybody see this man? Did they see this man who was a mother's child? Did they see this man who was just trying to get through life? Did they see him as a human being? And I have come here today to thank God that Marilyn Mosby and her team saw him. Saw him. The process has started. That's the main thing. The process has started. So many people in the neighborhoods that you have been filming over the last few days. I think somebody said it a little bit earlier. Bishop Thomas, I think, said it. They've never seen a victory. They've never seen a victory. And they had begun to believe that the system could not work for them. So many of them have felt like the system had worked against them. And so again, we are beginning the process. And one other thing that I said this morning, I said that as we approach the evening of our lives, many of us, we want to make sure that our children have a better morning. Yes. And so I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Bishop Walter Scott Thomas, all the members of the clergy, all the community leaders and organizations, our elected officials, for coming together to stand with our children, but most important, to hear them. To hear them. And so from here on, we'll, again, Ms. Mosby will take the case from here. I'm sure that this investigation will still be ongoing. That is not unusual. And the fact is that it is a new day in our city. But let me leave you with this. I don't want anybody to be confused. That the issues of police and community is one part of a broader set of issues. Yes. Our children need to be properly educated. Yes. They need to be trained in certain areas so they can get jobs. Yes. So they can be functional. Yes. And so they can have equal chance to opportunity. And so as I close out, I just want to say this. This is a great day. Yes. Great day. This is a great day, and I think we need to realize that. It would be a great day for politics. Thank you.
We witness history today in your mind, and is there a role for Congress and the federal government to use Baltimore as a model and example? Did we witness history?
I think I want to caution everybody that this is the beginning of a process. We did witness history in one respect, and that is so often these things happen and nothing happens. Yes. Right. Yes. And I think it's sending. And we witness history in this debate. Our children, they went out there and protest, for the most part peacefully. But they had to protest in order to get here. Yes. And this creates a faith in them. I had a young man that said to me just last night, at 16 years old, he said, "Congressman, I love you, but I feel like I'm in a casket, crawling and clawing to get out. Just trying to get out, just trying to be somebody." And so we've still got work to do. But yeah, I think this is let it be known that this is national. Yes. Mm-hmm. I said it before, these things can happen anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so
Congressman, with the charges against this officer in North Charleston a couple of weeks ago, and now these charges against these officers, do you see a shift in the tide where these officers are going to be held accountable for their actions?
I've said many times that we need to establish a new normal. See, a lot of times we think that we are in a normal situation, but it's a thing of mutual respect. Our policemen, and most of them are great. And they know themselves. I've talked to policemen. A lot. And they tell me themselves that there are certain police that should not be on the force. And so they're going to have to help us weed out those folks so that they can be the elite of the elite. One of the things that I'm determined to do, and I'm hoping that we're able to do, is make Baltimore a model for the nation. Yes. A model for the nation. We don't have to follow anybody. We can set the model. Yes. I believe that we set the model when we were at Pennsylvania and North, going out and talking to people. And a lot of the folks that we talked to, they just simply wanted to know that you hear them, and you see them, and you love them, and you respect them. Yes. And they want to live in dignity, and they want to see their futures. They want to see their futures, and they want somebody to see them. Last but not least, and then I'm closing. When I thought about Freddie, could not help but think about my own childhood. And I looked at him in that casket, and I said to myself, here was a young man just trying to exist. Trying to exist. And so hopefully now with this, our city can begin to heal, to come together. Policemen will look and women will look at their jobs from a different standpoint and realize that they are here to protect and serve. And by the way, and that our community must respect them. Yes. But it's got to be a mutual respect thing. Yes. Because let me tell you, the police need us as a community, and we need them. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Congressman Elijah Cummings wrapping up comments right outside of City Hall in Baltimore, just feet from us, in fact. We're going to see if we can't ask the congressman to come over to our live location. So many questions I have for him about these charges. But in the meantime, look at the pictures that are developing live in Baltimore. These are the pictures of spontaneous protests that have erupted in the streets. And I'm not sure you can call them protests or if you can call these celebrations. It may be a little of both. People have been emerging ever since the state's attorney in Baltimore announced that 6 of those officers involved in the arrest and the transport of Freddie Gray that ultimately resulted in his death have now been charged. The warrants are out. They have now been charged with everything from second-degree murder all the way down to misconduct in office, and each of the 6 facing a slightly different kind of array of charges, some of them being pointed to as more to blame for the death than others. In fact, the driver of the van being singled out as one who perhaps is the most culpable, if the charges are accurate. That is the second-degree murder charge that driver is facing. Those arresting officers, however, are facing different kinds of charges, mostly because of the way that Freddie Gray was pursued and arrested. The 8th Amendment says you have a right to avoid unlawful search and seizure, and you do not have the right to be arrested if there isn't some kind of probable cause. And the state's attorney says that there was not probable cause to go after Freddie Gray. In fact, she even went so far as to release a piece of information we had not known up until now, and that was that the knife that Freddie Gray had was in fact a legal knife. It was not a switchblade, as had been reported before. It was a legal knife, and that Freddie Gray had done nothing to warrant the chase and the arrest, and that is why you're seeing these kinds of charges yielding towards those officers who made the arrest. But again, other charges pertain to the way he was treated during the transport, the fact that he needed the help, the medical attention that he did not get time after 6 times, in fact, during that arrest and transportation when he asked for help, was checked on, and did not get that kind of medical help. A couple of things we're also watching as the streets in Baltimore start to see people coming out, many of them in support, many of them calling that justice has been actually found at this point, or at least observed in this point. We are a long way from the end of this justice process, because charges are one thing. Trials and convictions are quite another thing. We're also watching Oakland, California, where there are some protests and demonstrations that have spontaneously erupted as well, since just about 2 hours ago, about an hour and a half ago, Marilyn Mosby, the state attorney for Baltimore, announced on the steps of the War Memorial that there will be charges. And look at that. It is only 9:21 in the morning in Oakland, California, and already probably I would say that's upwards of 200, at least on your screen, people coming out. Don't forget, this is also May Day, International Workers' Day, so many people had planned to protest today for those reasons. Immigration as well on the agenda, but today many also coming out because of Freddie Gray and because of the announcement of charges against him. Soon for you, we're also going to have the president, who at the White House has reacted as well to the situation developing in Baltimore. And this situation, I call it developing, it is emerging. Everything has been changing from the first day that Freddie Gray was arrested, to the day that he died, to the day the protests erupted, to the day the looting and the destruction and the crime in the streets erupted, to the days afterwards in which we all waited for a police report that was just delivered yesterday to the state's attorney. I asked that state's attorney, did that police report play heavily into your decision to make these 6 officers now arrested and facing these charges. And she said they didn't give us anything we didn't already know. They'd already been conducting their own independent investigation in the state attorney's office, and that was effectively what she said yielded the information that she has. We're also, like I said, awaiting the word from the president as he reacts to what's happening in Baltimore. And Elijah Cummings, we were hoping to try to get him over to our location as well, but as you can imagine, the situation out here extremely fluid. A couple of other things on the agenda today. We're going to analyze some of these charges. I mentioned a few moments ago, it is one thing to face charges. It is quite another thing to face convictions. And I just want you to remember, back in '92, there were riots in the streets of Los Angeles because 4 officers who had gone through the process, there had been probable cause, they had been arrested, they went to trial for the beating of a black man, and they were acquitted. And when they were acquitted, the LA riots erupted. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and what that means for this case as well. In the meantime, I want to go out to Brian Todd, our correspondent, who's out on the streets and monitoring this situation, of those who have now heard the message from the state's attorney. Brian?
Ashley, they've heard that, and they've heard it loud and clear. The announcement of these charges has provoked a spontaneous street celebration here at the corner of North and Pennsylvania Avenues. This has been the flashpoint for the protests. It has been the epicenter of some of the violence, but now it is a street party. People out here spontaneously jumping up, laughing, cheering. They're disrupting traffic a little bit, but not too seriously. A lot of horn honking, very loud, cars and trucks passing by here, showing you some of the atmosphere here. A real street celebration here in West Baltimore. But at the same time, Ashley, we have to say that a lot of people out here are telling us that as happy as they are that these charges are being brought, that this is not over. We just talked to a couple of protesters, a couple of leaders of the protests who say they're not really going to rest until they get the convictions that they feel are deserved in this case, if those convictions come. So they believe that this is a big victory today. It's one step, and they're celebrating that big step, but they say this is not over yet, Ashley. We'll just kind of let our photojournalist Jordan Gazzardo show you what's going on here, and I'll toss it back to you.
Brian, I don't know if you can still hear me, Brian, but I wanted to ask you a question. The police union representing those officers has sent an open letter to the state's attorney, to Marilyn Mosby, effectively asking her to instead appoint an independent prosecutor to take over this process. I'm just going to read a very short portion of this letter. It said, "Not one of the officers involved in this tragic situation left home in the morning with the anticipation that someone with whom they'd interacted would not go home that night. As tragic as the situation is, none of the officers involved are responsible for the death of Mr. Gray. To the contrary, at all times, each of the officers diligently balanced their obligations to protect Mr. Gray and discharge their duties to protect the public." You're out there in the streets with the people who are effectively celebrating, demonstrating. What about all of those officers who are out there? Are you seeing anything? Can you read anything from them, or is it business as usual? They're doing their job.
It really is business as usual, Ashley. I can take you over here to your right, my left. These are some Pennsylvania State Police officers intermixed with some Baltimore and Maryland State troopers. There are some other state police over, these are Baltimore police over here. But basically business as usual. They are hanging back. They are not moving into the street. They are letting these people have their space as they have in previous days. So as far as the police on the street right now, business as usual. They are being very subtle about their presence. They're out in force, but they are really not moving in on these people.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Brian. I only want to wrap you because we've been awaiting word from the president. He gave some taped comments a short time ago from the Roosevelt Room in the White House. No doubt he's been seeing his television monitors in the White House as he prepares to make a statement about Baltimore. Have a listen.
It's absolutely vital that the truth comes out on what happened to Mr. Freddie Gray. And it is my practice not to comment on the legal processes involved. That would not be appropriate. But I can tell you that justice needs to be served. All the evidence needs to be presented. Those individuals who are charged obviously are also entitled to due process and rule of law. And so I want to make sure that our legal system runs the way it should. And the Justice Department and our new Attorney General is in communications with Baltimore officials to make sure that any assistance we can provide on the investigation is provided. But what I think the people of Baltimore want more than anything else is the truth. That's what people around the country expect. And to the extent that it's appropriate, this administration will help local officials get to the bottom of exactly what happened. In the meantime, I'm gratified that we've seen the constructive, thoughtful protests that have been taking place, peaceful, but clear calls for accountability, that those have been managed over the last couple of days in a way that's ultimately positive for Baltimore and positive for the country. And I hope that approach to nonviolent protest and community engagement continues. And finally, as I've said for the last year, we are going to continue to work with the task force that we put together post-Ferguson. I'm actually going to be talking to mayors who are interested in figuring ways to rebuild trust between community and police and to focus on some of the issues that were raised by the task force right after this meeting. Our efforts to make sure that we're providing greater opportunity for young people in these communities, all those things are going to be continuing top priorities for the administration, and we'll probably have some more announcements and news about that in the days and weeks to come. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Hope you have a great weekend.
The President of the United States from the Roosevelt Room releasing those comments about the situation in Baltimore just moments ago, saying that these officers, all 6 who have been charged, at least one seriously charged with second-degree murder, they also deserve their due process, that they also are entitled to the rule of law. Also saying that the new Department of Justice head, the Attorney General Loretta Lynch, also involved in speaking regularly with officials in Baltimore to help in this process. We are back live with the evolving situation on the streets of Baltimore and across the country in just a moment.
It was ambitious, but someone had to do it. That's insane, some say. But why do it? Some asked. There are over 170 million reasons why. But why you, the persistent? If not us, then who? Which other provider will invest so much in our country than the one with the most at stake? Investing billions in drawing the Glow 1 submarine cable through the continents, from America to England, to Portugal, to North Africa, all the way through and finally home to West Africa, bringing with us massive internet bandwidth on the infrastructure that makes it possible.
Stay ahead. Upgrade to Glow Mobile Broadband. High-speed internet for everyone. Get 4.5 gigabytes for only 2,500 naira and a whopping 24 gigabytes for just 8,000 naira.
There is a saying in Nigeria, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It is often important to find the right balance between the two, and for this we all need the right support. First Bank, championing SME development in Africa through First Bank SME Connect.
Join Michael Holmes and Amara Walker for original reporting on the day's global news. CNN Today, Sunday through Thursday on CNN.
These are the shores of Aden. Aden has seen some of the fiercest fighting since the conflict in Yemen began. We're going into the ICU, the intensive care unit. This is the Baz Suhaib Hospital. It was originally a military hospital. It has become the de facto general hospital. There is a queue outside this bakery and all the others like it. This is all the flour that they have left. And when that's gone, there is no more.
We should be on the air at 6 o'clock as predicted.
Choose to go. Go where no one has gone before.
The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated.
Where no one else will go today. You can go in search of answers, only to find more questions. You might discover something unfamiliar halfway around the world, or uncover something unexpected far closer to home. Sometimes you might need to look back to see how you got here and where you might be headed. And just when you think your journey's reached an end, you'll be surprised to find it's only just beginning. But you'll keep going because it's your journey, wherever it goes.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Welcome back to our breaking news coverage on CNN. I'm Ashley Banfield, live in Baltimore. We want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I want to show you some of the reaction to the announcement that 6 officers are now facing charges in the death of Freddie Gray, who was in their custody upon being arrested. On the left of your screen, the streets of Baltimore erupting into spontaneous demonstrations, many of them celebrations, but also on your right, you can see the mobilization of some of those National Guard vehicles. Now, some of these are Humvees. The tan ones are actually armored Humvees. The ones that you might see in your screen coming through that are camouflaged are soft-sided Humvees, and some of the larger trucks are these light, medium, tactical vehicles that are also in the streets, and they're transporting many of the National Guard's members around the streets of Baltimore. They are on the move here in Baltimore. There are also spontaneous demonstrations that have erupted on the other coast as well. In Oakland, California, we can tell you that dozens upon dozens of people have come out into the streets there as well. I will remind you, this is May Day, International Workers' Day, so many protests may already have been scheduled prior to this very surprising announcement today from the state's attorney here in Baltimore that the 6 officers will in fact face charges, and naming all of the different charges. But nonetheless, people are emerging out into the streets spontaneously here as well in Baltimore. We've seen a number of people coming by with signs, many of them very vocal as well. Certainly when the charges were read on the steps of the War Memorial, a lot of people cheering, in fact. I want to go through for you exactly what these charges are and which officers are facing what, because they are different depending on the role that those officers played. I'm going to start with Officer Garrett Miller, who's facing assault in the 2nd degree, misconduct in office, and false imprisonment. Sergeant Alicia White is facing manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, 2nd degree assault, and misconduct in office. Officer Caesar Goodson, the driver of the van, perhaps facing the most serious charges and the most charges. He is facing 2nd degree murder with a depraved heart. He's also facing involuntary manslaughter, also facing 2nd degree assault, also facing manslaughter by vehicle in gross negligent manner, manslaughter by vehicle in a criminally negligent manner, different because they yield different sentences, misconduct in office as well. Officer William Porter, involuntary manslaughter, 2nd degree assault, and misconduct in office. Officer Brian Rice, manslaughter of the involuntary nature, 2nd degree assault, misconduct in office, and false imprisonment as well for the way that Freddie Gray was arrested and transported. Officer Edward Nero, 2nd degree assault, misconduct in office, and also false imprisonment. And we should mention as well that the number of sentences that are attached to each of these charges go into the decades. So these are extraordinarily serious charges that each of these 6 officers will be facing, predominantly the driver facing that 2nd degree murder charge. I want to welcome now to our set Congressman Elijah Cummings, who was just giving an ad hoc news conference not far away. Congressman, thank you for taking the time to come by.
Good to be with you.
It's great to be with you. I want to ask one of the most serious questions that emerges after so many people so delighted and elated that charges have in fact been filed. Arrest warrants have gone out. Charges are one thing. Convictions are another thing,
That's
as
right.
we all remember from the Rodney King riots. Those riots erupted in 1992 because the 4 officers in his beating were arrested, they were charged, they were tried, they were acquitted.
Yeah. Well, my main concern right now is that the wheels of justice are rolling for this young man who died. You know, there's a process. Our judicial system, there's a process, and we'll go through that process and we'll get through it. But again, just this morning, on this network, I said that whatever Marilyn Mosby decided, it would be fine with me.
Did you expect to hear it?
No, I did not. I did not. I didn't know what she would do.
Shocking. But
I know her. And I know she's a brilliant young lawyer, and she is one who lives not very far from me in the inner city. She is well educated. She has the utmost integrity, and I knew that she would take a look at the facts, size them up with the law, and make a reasonable, fair judgment after thorough investigation. I also said this morning that she knew that she had the force of the United States government behind her. In other words, if she was not satisfied with what she got from the Baltimore City Police, she could always go to the FBI for help. So,
just as you
so
were
I'm
walking,
satisfied.
Just as you were walking over here, in fact, the president released some live comments to tape from the Roosevelt Room in the White House, suggesting that the force of the DOJ and the new Attorney General Loretta Lynch will be here for the officials in Baltimore as they go through this process. I want to ask you as well, though, the police union representing these 6 and all of the other officers, half of them black, half of them white, many of mixed race as well, and Hispanic as well, and other races as well. That union has said that they want to see an independent special prosecutor instead of this prosecutor. What's your reaction?
We have a prosecutor who is willing to take this on, and we elected her. The people of this city elected her, and so she is well qualified to do this case. In many instances, things like this have happened, and there has been no charges. And so I don't know what they said in those instances where a prosecutor or a grand jury decided not to charge. But I don't want to get too deep into the charges because this is an ongoing case. I'm a lawyer, and I'm always an officer of the court. But again, we just want justice to be done. I've said it over and over again that we wanted a search for the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And I think that's what she's doing, pursuing the truth. And a jury will hear the case, and they will make a decision.
So as a lawyer, I am so delighted to be able to ask you this. With the congressman and the lawyer title both, you have probably seen many courtrooms where things don't go exactly as planned, especially when you have multiple defendants all involved in an emerging crime, an emerging situation. I should say alleged crime at this time, because there are 6 people who undoubtedly will be able to do this. It was him or her who did it. It was not me who did it. It creates that thing that we call reasonable doubt that is so critical in a courtroom. Are you confident that that will not be the emerging story from this case, and that all 6, it will be too much doubt for all 6 to get a realistic conviction?
There are all kinds of cases where you have that kind of situation, and I am convinced that, again, she will present her case. They will have their defense counsel, and that case will be presented to a judge and jury, and they will make a fair and reasonable decision.
Can I ask you, Congressman, did Marilyn Mosby have a choice? I mean, if you think really, did she have a choice? Because if she had stood out on those steps, sir, and said, we just can't find probable cause, we don't see any indictments down the road, this town might have burned.
Ma'am, you don't know Marilyn Mosby. She had only one choice, just one, and that is to do what she believed. Knowing her, that was the only choice, period. That's by the way, that's what justice is all about. That's what justice should be about. And that's what I said this morning, before I knew anything. Whatever she decided, because I believe in her, and her integrity, and her brilliance, that she would do what was right. And I was willing to accept it, whatever it was.
Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's a busy day. And the best of luck to you as well as you navigate through with your community. This There's a lot of communication that's needed in this town.
We've got a lot of work to do.
You have the weight of the world on your shoulders.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you. I hope you'll come back and speak with us again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
There's so much to continue covering.
You're watching CNN. I'm Robin Kerner, and we're going to now turn our attention away from Baltimore and turn to Nepal. We want to bring you the latest information there. We now know more than 6,200 people are dead and thousands are missing, nearly a week after that devastating earthquake. Reaching those in need is still a monumental task. Nepal's government is now asking for more helicopters to help reach victims in those remote areas outside of the capital. Nepalese officials tell CNN they have just 20 helicopters for the entire relief and rescue operation. Now, travel is always difficult in rural Nepal, but the earthquake has made access to many areas all but impossible. CNN's Awa Damon went to the area hardest hit to show us the utter destruction and the growing desperation.
The overnight rains, coupled with ongoing tremors, bring more fears of landslides. Those already caused by the earthquake visible in the distance as we try to make our way towards the epicenter. Past the destroyed homes in the valley, its mountains populated with small villages, whose residents are so desperately in need, some have decided to walk to help rather than wait. We had nothing left, this man says. We arrive at the only assistance around for hours, a makeshift aid and distribution center set up by a paragliding group and volunteers, like retired paramedic American Stacy Baker, who was in Nepal on vacation. She's treating her sickest patient of the day, this tiny baby who arrived feverish and lethargic.
Many people are coming for provisions and food and stuff like that. We think the sicker people that need to be seen can't get here.
A bit further down is as far as we can get by car, where some more aid has arrived, though barely a fraction of what is needed. The landslides have cut off roads to entire villages, like one called Keura that we are trying to reach. Crossing paths now covered in the rubble of homes and pieces of shattered lives.
This used to be a road?
Yes.
There's a child's homework here. My name is Bahadur.
Our guide is from Keura, the journey up the mountain filled with tragic stories of those who perished.
Ron Bahadur was just telling us that there's a spot down there where falling boulders killed 3 villagers as they were cutting grass.
In the distance, more destruction. Overhead helicopters circle regularly. We reach one village at the top. The ruins of a home where 3 children died. Their mother also killed in a landslide. Her husband Morego was with her. I heard her screaming and then nothing, he says. The devastation here is endless, overwhelming. 4 hours after we started out, we finally arrive in Keura, also entirely in ruins. 13-year-old Sarmila's back was crushed when a wall collapsed on her.
So there's been no aid up here, so they've had to use herbal medicines.
She can barely walk and is in constant pain. The family only has rice to eat. We make our way back down at dusk.
These are some of the villagers that we met earlier on in the day, only just making it up here with a little bit of the aid that they were able to get.
It won't last long. The populations here among Nepal's poorest, left with nothing and no one to really help them. Arwa Damon, CNN, Keura, Nepal.
Thanks to Awa for that report. Now, many people are just growing frustrated with the pace of relief efforts. You can see a few dozen protesters blocked a road in central Kathmandu earlier today. Some say they know aid is coming in from other nations and fault their own government for not distributing it quickly enough. Meanwhile, the hospitals in Kathmandu are overwhelmed. The government says so far nearly 14,000 people are known to be injured. Doctors are working around the clock to treat them, but more resources are desperately needed.
The challenges is the space. We need more space. The thing is we need more logistic. Logistic means it's like the equipments, implants needed for the operations. And we need a lot of disposable gowns and drapes and a lot of things needed, disposable ones, because we cannot wash the linen. We have no time to wash and all, and then we need a lot of antibiotics, maybe, that is IV antibiotics. And these kind of logistics we are lacking now.
With that kind of wish list in mind, find out how you can help the relief effort in Nepal by logging on to our special website. CNN.com/impact has all the information, including a list of groups that are already at work trying to get aid to those who need it. Again, CNN.com/impact. Well, we're less than a week away from the most highly anticipated UK election in decades. Last night, the candidates fielded tough questions from voters during a BBC event. A viewer poll shows Prime Minister David Cameron walked away the winner, with 44% of respondents saying he performed the best. Labour leader Ed Miliband came in second with 38%, and Liberal Democrat leader Nick Clegg was third. To Hong Kong now, where the daughter of a billionaire is speaking out after she was kidnapped last weekend, then rescued. She's shaken but safe, and the hunt is on for those who took her and the enormous ransom paid for her freedom. Here's Christy Lou Stout with that story.
A massive manhunt in Hong Kong. Hundreds of police scoured a country park this week in search of 6 suspected kidnappers who got away with a multi-million-dollar ransom. The victim, an heiress to a clothing empire. Police say 29-year-old Queenie Law was taken from her home last Saturday night and found unharmed on Tuesday after her family reportedly paid her kidnappers $3.6 million. I want to make use of this press conference to tell everyone that neither my spirit nor my body suffered or sustained any injury because of the kidnapping, she said on Thursday. A Hong Kong South China Morning Post quotes a police source saying they believe the kidnappers are members of a professional burglary gang from mainland China. Hong Kong is considered one of Asia's safest cities, but it's not the first time kidnappers have targeted the ultra-rich. In the mid-90s, property tycoon Walter Kwok was abducted. He was released after kidnappers were paid a $77 million ransom. Victor Lee, the son of Asia's richest man Li Ka-shing, was also kidnapped. His family paid $129 million for his release. The leader of the gang that kidnapped Kwok and Lee was captured and executed by mainland China in 1998. As for Law, police aren't saying much about how far they've come in tracking down the suspects, only telling CNN that the investigation goes on. Christy Lou Stout, CNN, Hong Kong.
Well, we're just one day away from a long-awaited boxing match between two legendary rivals. The details on the Mayweather-Pacquiao match are just ahead. You're at the International Desk. Stay with us.
Open Court, in association with RADA.
Well, we've talked so much about clay being a unique surface, I can't let you go without giving you some tips. But the first thing you've got to do is lace up your clay court shoes. Clay is a slippery surface, so controlled sliding is the #1 thing players have to adjust to at this time of the season. Now to finish the point off, I want my opponent slipping over and sliding out of position, and I can do that with the drop shot.
Welcome back to the International Desk. I'm Robin Kerno. Now, boxers Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao are getting ready for their long-awaited match. Tonight, they'll weigh in. Well, earlier this week, the two fighters stood face-to-face at their final news conference before Saturday's big fight. CNN World Sport host Don Riddell spoke to both men about their expectations for the match.
This one is different, and I'm excited for the fight on Saturday.
and I'm sure the fans will love it.
I've just been speaking to Freddie Roach. He was just here a couple of minutes ago. Apparently you've been hitting him very, very hard in sparring. He told me to ask you, are you going to hit Floyd as hard as you've been hitting Freddie?
What we did in training, in preparation, we will use it in the fight.
Floyd Mayweather says this fight is all about money. What do you think it's all about? What are you in this for?
Not only about that, but it's all about how we entertain people, how we entertain the fans, and they deserve, the fans deserve to have a good fight, deserve to be satisfied on Saturday, because they're paying more than double compared to the regular fight.
Just growth, maturing over the years, I'm not far from 40 years old. So, I've been in the sport as a professional 19 years, and you grow. You can no longer, I can't grow physical anymore, so, mentally I have to grow. So, sometimes you outgrow certain things.
Now, I gather you never watch tapes of your opponent. Is that something you've changed in the build-up to this fight, and why don't you typically watch the tapes?
I think I never watch tapes because I think that when a guy faces Floyd Mayweather, he has a total different game plan. But I've seen him fight before, and I mean, he's a solid competitor.
What are you expecting from Manny Pacquiao on Saturday? What do you think he's going to bring to the table?
He's a very, wild fighter, a very reckless fighter. So, me, I'm a sharpshooter. I will be on point. Both sides have said a lot, but my thing is this: it's all about the two competitors, and I mean, he's going to come and bring his best, and his best is going to bring the best out of me.
Well, in the Philippines, where Pacquiao is from, the fighter's even been given his own postage stamp. Now, the products he endorses are flying off the store shelves too. Here's Ivan Watson to tell us about the country's Pac-Man fever.
A man best known for his fast fists sings his heart out. Just days before the biggest fight of his career, Manny the Pac-Man Pacquiao released this love letter to his country, an anthem titled, "I Will Fight for the Filipino People." The feeling is clearly mutual.
He's my idol.
He's your idol?
Yeah, for boxing, yeah.
In the Philippines, Pacquiao is considered a national treasure. The upcoming fight against Floyd Mayweather, which will take place Sunday morning local time, will be something of a national holiday. These days, Pac-Man fever has even spread to the post office, where these new stamps were issued just days before the big battle. Are the stamps popular?
Yes, because this stamp is selling like hotcakes,
It's selling like hotcakes?
Yes.
And it's not only stamps. Ahead of the big fight, T-shirts are selling fast here at this Manny Pacquiao souvenir shop. Some of the items for sale may surprise you. For instance, he's got a watch that he advertises here as a bit of an eye patch. And there's also a Manny Pacquiao cologne. It's called Scent of the Champion. Smells like victory. Everyone you talk to has plans to watch what many here are calling the fight of the century. Do you think there are any Floyd Mayweather fans in the Philippines?
I don't know any.
Anticipation is so high that one electric company executive urged citizens to unplug their appliances this weekend to ensure there would be enough power for everyone to watch the battle in Las Vegas. The fight will be broadcast live in city squares and on many local TV stations. It'll also be shown for a price in Manila's movie theaters, where it'll be projected live onto the big screen. In the Philippines, Pacquiao is more than just a boxer. He's also a coach and player on his own professional basketball team, a member of Congress, and a real-live rags-to-riches success story who went from a childhood of poverty to being one of the world's wealthiest athletes. When Pacquiao and Mayweather step into the ring, there's no question who Filipinos will be rooting for.
So, do you guys think Manny Pacquiao is going to win?
Yes, of course.
Ivan Watson, CNN, Manila.
You're at the International Desk. I'm Robin Kerno. Don't go anywhere. Wolf Blitzer is up next.
Dubai is 8-hour flying time from 2/3 of the world's population and has earned a growing reputation as a leading global gateway and a hub for trade, logistics, and tourism. Now we are focused on earning a reputation for excellence in healthcare, medical research, and education.
Dubai's prime position, with its healthy annual growth, is the ideal place for Dubai Healthcare City, a destination that is already home to hospitals, clinics, and a dedicated medical education facility. We offer 100% foreign ownership and international standards of regulation.
Dubai Healthcare City is perfectly positioned for investors and for patients. We are building a healthcare destination for everyone for generations to come.
World politics, today's issues, and all the breaking news. Wolf, coming up next on CNN. The planet is picturesque, and with one photo we can capture it.
Photography is an instant.
Legendary aerial photographer Yann Arthus Bertrand guides us to this month's Ones to Watch, a choreographer of images.
Sometimes there is a moment where everybody stops and you have a magical moment.
And an artist colouring conflict like never before.
It's about what we can't see and finding ways to make us see it.
CNN Ones to Watch, Tuesday on CNN, in association with Cartier.
In real estate, every square meter counts, whether it's a trendy container home, a villa facing the sea, or a new development in an emerging market. What makes a property the next hot address? Every week on 1 Square Meter, we go to every corner of the globe, from hot properties to hot spots, to see where developers are moving in, so investors can prosper.
1 Square Meter, Tuesday in Connect the World, in association with MR.
I'm Nick Payton-Walsh in Kobani, and this is CNN.
Hello, I'm Wolf Blitzer reporting from Washington. I want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And let's begin with the breaking news. 6 Baltimore police officers facing criminal charges in the death of Freddie Gray. In an extraordinary news conference just a little while ago, the prosecutor said the medical examiner had determined that Gray's death was a homicide resulting from a fatal injury he suffered inside the police van. Baltimore State Attorney Marilyn Mosby said officers failed to get medical help for Gray, and she says they had no probable cause to arrest him in the first place. The 6 officers now face charges ranging from second-degree depraved heart murder to manslaughter to second-degree assault. Mosby urged the community to be patient and peaceful as the legal process unfolds.
I hope that as we move forward with this case, everyone will respect due process and refrain from doing anything that will jeopardize our ability to seek justice. To the people of Baltimore and the demonstrators across America, I heard your call for no justice, no peace. Your peace is sincerely needed as I work to deliver justice on behalf of this young man. To those that are angry, hurt, or have their own experiences of injustice at the hands of police officers, I urge you to channel the energy peacefully as we prosecute this case. I have heard your calls for no justice, no peace. However, your peace is sincerely needed as I work to deliver justice on behalf of Freddie Gray. To the rank and file officers of the Baltimore City Police Department, Please know that these accusations of these 6 officers are not an indictment on the entire force. I come from 5 generations of law enforcement. My father was an officer. My mother was an officer. Several of my aunts and uncles. My recently departed and beloved grandfather was one of the founding members of the first black police organization in Massachusetts. I can tell you that the actions of these officers will not and should not in any way damage the important working relationships between police and prosecutors as we continue to fight together to reduce crime in Baltimore. Thank you for your courage, commitment, and sacrifice for the betterment of our communities.
A powerful statement from the state's attorney, and only moments ago, President Obama had this to say about charges being filed against those 6 police officers.
It is absolutely vital that the truth comes out on what happened to Mr. Freddie Gray. And it is my practice not to comment on the legal processes involved. That would not be appropriate. But I can tell you that justice needs to be served. All the evidence needs to be presented. Those individuals who are charged obviously are also entitled to due process and rule of law. And so I want to make sure that our legal system runs the way it should.
And we're standing by to hear from the mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawlings-Blake. She's got a news conference scheduled momentarily. John Berman is on the scene for us. He's there in Baltimore. What's been the reaction that you're seeing, at least so far, John?
Wolf, the announcement was made. Marilyn Mosby, the state's attorney, made this announcement not 100 yards from where I'm standing right now. And as soon as she said that she was pressing charges, there were cheers here where I am right in front of City Hall. And ever since then, people have been honking their car horns. There's a small demonstration going on right now in support of the decision, people blowing whistles. A very interesting reaction here, almost a palpable sense of relief. There are still marches planned for later today, still marches planned for this weekend, but you think they will take on a somewhat different tone. One thing we're all going to be watching very closely, Wolf, is the next couple hours or so when school lets out here. The young people of this city have been central in the events here over the last 4 days. A lot of the unrest that started on Monday happened when kids were let out of school. One of the questions we want to know is how will they react? If they haven't learned already in school, how will they react when they learn that charges are being filed against these officers? I'm joined by someone who works a lot with kids, high school kids, kids in cities. Jay Morrison is the millennial leader of YMC, which is Young Minds Can. You have been here in Baltimore since Monday. Yes. Since this week became really something extraordinary here. How do you think the kids you've been working with, how do you think they will react when they learn that these officers are being charged with things as serious as murder?
Well, I think there's going to be cheers. There's going to be some relief. And what we are doing to organize that energy we know is coming, my big brother here in Baltimore is the unofficial mayor, Stokey, has organized a rally in Cloverdale Park to show support and show thanks to the prosecutor, to the attorney general for stepping up to the plate and putting the indictment out on these 6 police thugs.
So these people who have been protesting, many of them who've been protesting over the last several days, in some ways against the system, today you want them to come out and protest or demonstrate in support of the system.
Well, the support is not of the system, right? Because the system's still broken. The micro issue is that, yes, there was an indictment made, and we have one step towards justice for Freddie Gray and for his family and for the city of Baltimore. But the macro issue is the Freddie Grays, the Eric Garners, the Mike Browns, the Trayvon Martins, the Oscar Grants of the world, and that there's still macro oppression by this government system towards African Americans in America. So that still has to be addressed. So yes, we're excited. There's one small step towards justice, but let the news cycle not die and understand that black people are screaming out to our white brothers and sisters and Hispanic and everyone in between, to global citizens, help free us, help end the oppression of African Americans in America. It's been happening for 450 years.
So the process, though, at least here in Baltimore, in this case, you believe at this point is working. These officers have not been convicted. The president a short time ago said that they deserve due process. That's what our system calls for. What do you want to see in this case going forward?
But I want to address that real quick. You say they deserve due process, and they do. As do the youth of Baltimore, who were called thugs for rioting on Monday. None were convicted of anything, but everyone from Ray Lewis to the president all called them thugs. But I haven't heard anyone yet lash out at the police officers who've been indicted now and call them thugs for murder.
I'm sorry, the system in this case has lashed out against them. The system has charged them with crimes that could convict at least one of them with 30 years in jail. That is how the system, in fact, lashes out, is it not?
Yes, but that system has also failed us many and many times. And we're really quick to put our youth out there as bad examples and bad words. But we're very slow to point fingers at bad policing and bad police.
This time, though, as you say, you're going to be out there in support of this decision. We appreciate the work you're doing with the young people here. We wish you luck in the days
ahead. Young Minds Pen, YC.
Thanks, Jay.
All right.
Wolf?
All right, John, we're going to get back to you. I know you're going to get some more reaction. What's going on? We're also standing by for that news conference. The mayor, Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, getting ready to make a statement reacting to what the state's attorney announced today, the indictment of these 6 Baltimore police officers in connection with the death of Freddie Gray. Let's get some more reaction. Joining us now is Mark Morial. He's the president of the National Urban League, who's joining us. Were you surprised, Mark, at how forceful she was? A lot of us thought maybe she'd convene a grand jury first, but she's gone ahead now, the state's attorney, and indicted these 6 police officers. They face very serious charges. Can you hear me, Mark?
Wolf, I got you. Good afternoon.
Yeah. I was just asking, I don't know if you could hear me. Were you surprised at how forceful the state's attorney was, that she went ahead and formally filed these charges against these 6 police officers? A lot of people thought, including me, maybe she'd convene a grand jury first.
You know, I got the sense yesterday when I was in Baltimore that there was, I think, an effort to be quick and decisive but thorough. And this prosecutor, of course, is a newly elected prosecutor who ran on and I think has the mandate from the people to both root out crime in Baltimore, but also to hold police accountable. So it's clear that while all of the police investigations are being undertaken, she was doing her own parallel investigation. And I think I'll be curious to take a look at the medical examiner's report, which I think is going to be a crucial piece of evidence as this moves. So this is a step, Wolf, in the criminal justice process, the bringing of charges, but there's a lot more if justice is going to be attained for the death of Mr. Gray.
When you say a lot more, what else do you want? Let's say the process goes forward, there's a trial against these 6 police officers. What more do you want to see?
I think I want to make sure that the process is clear, it's unambiguous, that there is a trial, that a jury is seated. I mean, we know that there have been cases in the past where charges have been brought, but somewhere along the way, no conviction is attained. So I applaud the prosecutor she's been very quiet up until now and very much focused on doing her job as a state's attorney. And no one expected this, which means that there clearly were no leaks from her office, from her operation, or from her investigation. And I think yesterday's piece of information was floated out, I suspect, that came from police sources who may have been trying to issue what I call a preemptive defense. But all of this also shows, Wolf, this continuing issue of not only these incidents occurring, but it seems to be a systematic effort by some police to either cover it up or to, if you will, paint a picture of what happened that's inconsistent with the truth. That concerned me in North Charleston. It certainly concerns me here in Baltimore, but the prosecutor saw through that, and I think she's been swift and decisive, and I think this is an important step.
And you see crowds gathering in Baltimore. They're reacting, and we're going to check in with those crowds, Mark, to see what they're saying. And we're standing by for the news conference. The mayor, Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, I believe she's going to be joined by the Maryland Congressman Elijah Cummings as well. He's been really there out on the streets of Baltimore these past few days. This is his district where the death of Freddie Gray occurred. What do you want to see happen now in the short term, Mark?
You know, I think it's important. I was pleased to hear the prosecutor call for, if you will, peace. And I clearly, yesterday, being in Baltimore at New Shiloh Baptist Church with the mayor, with a broad cross-section of religious and political leaders there in Baltimore, a sense that the overwhelming number of people in Baltimore do not wish to see violence, but do feel the need to continue peaceful demonstrations and peaceful protests to keep the attention on justice for Freddie Gray, but also, I think, attention on the long-standing need there in Baltimore for the entire Baltimore Police Department to be reformed. And I think, and I've said this to you and certainly to the public, this very important need to address the joblessness issue, the poverty issue, which has become exacerbated in America since the Great Recession.
I want you to stand by if you can, Mark, because we're standing by to hear from the mayor of Baltimore. We're going to have that news conference. If you could stick around, we'll get your reaction to what she has to say as these 6 police officers now face charges in the Freddie Gray case. We're going to get the police perspective as well, and we're going to take you back to the streets of Baltimore where crowds, you can see them, they're gathering right now. Lots of breaking news happening today. We're covering it all. Stay with us.
Is beauty? Is it a view that's been waiting for you for centuries? A setting that gives you goosebumps when you see it for the first time? Is it a moment that stops you in your tracks and leaves you in awe? Some people spend their whole lives looking for it. When you open yourself up to it, suddenly you find yourself in a place where true beauty isn't something you'll ever see. Because when you meet South Africa, you'll reconsider what you think you know.
When you witness war and see the impact firsthand, when you face the reality of famine, genocide, and natural disaster, you can't help but be affected. But these experiences are important. They give us knowledge.
She says yes, women are the future.
And they give us no choice but to ask questions, especially the ones people don't want to answer.
This is a pretty shocking picture. Would you condemn President Assad for 100,000 plus deaths?
These experiences don't just make it possible for us to know where the story might go. They demand that we go with it.
West Africa and the world are seeing an infectious disease outbreak on a scale not seen before in modern times. Ebola is claiming thousands of lives, and it's not under control yet. But we are not powerless. We can act to stop the spread. What's urgently needed on the ground are doctors and nurses, medical supplies, and urgent action to stop people getting the disease in the first place. But the important thing is to act now. To get involved, go to actionaid.org.
Coming up on Open Court, make way for the clay. The race to Roland Garros heats up in Monte Carlo.
There's no better place to start a clay court season than here.
Plus, they call him the mastermind.
The pressure she has is unbelievable because every time she wins, it's normal. And if she loses, it's what's happening.
Hear what it's like coaching world #1 Serena Williams. And wedding bells are ringing in Scotland. Andy Murray ties the knot. Sunday on Open Court.
In association with Rado.
People are reacting. They're gathering on the streets of Baltimore following the announcement just a little while ago by the state's attorney that 6 Baltimore police officers have been charged in Freddie Gray's death. We're getting reaction from the mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawlings Blake. She's getting ready to hold a news conference. Momentarily, we're told we'll have live coverage of that coming up from City Hall. In the meantime, let's go to the streets of Baltimore. Brian Todd is getting reaction there. What's happening, Brian?
Wolf, a spontaneous, loud, very joyous celebration has been going on here, really at the epicenter of where the protests have been taking place over the past few days. This is Pennsylvania and North Avenue in West Baltimore. Here's the scene. You've got people across the street over here chanting on bullhorns, doing some spontaneous street performances almost. This gentleman over here in the white T-shirt's been interesting. He's been kind of helping direct traffic and dancing at the same time. So you've got people performing dual functions out here. He's a volunteer. And just, look, it's a very happy atmosphere. A lot of horn honking, as you can hear, but people are, by and large, being very responsible. They're adhering to the police wishes to try to stay at least on the corners and on the street corners. On occasion, they'll come in and block a little bit of traffic. That really is mostly to kind of celebrate with someone in a vehicle who's honking, and then they'll move away from it. So right now, just a joyous occasion here on the streets, and hopefully it won't escalate beyond that. What I can tell you also, Wolf, we can make a distinction here. We can say that the police are out in numbers, as you can see over there. They are out in numbers, but they are not out in force. They've really kind of hung back intersection. And as crazy and as loud as it is out here, it is still a functioning intersection. I'll let our photojournalist Jordan Gazzardo just kind of show you this picture. So here you have it, Wolf. We'll see how long this goes. The curfew, of course, is going to be at 10 o'clock tonight. I anticipate a lot of these people will be out here at least until that time.
Yeah, and they say the curfew will remain in effect through the weekend, 10 p.m. Eastern till 5 a.m. Eastern as well. Brian, we're going to get back to you. Brian's not far from that CVS pharmacy that was looted Monday night. 6 police officers, once again, they're facing charges now in the death of Freddie Gray. Among the charges, second-degree murder and manslaughter. Here's part of what we heard just a little while ago from the state's attorney, Marilyn Mosby.
Lieutenant Rice, Officer Miller, and Officer Nero failed to establish probable cause for Mr. Gray's arrest as no crime had been committed by Mr. Gray. Accordingly, Lieutenant Rice, Officer Miller, and Officer Nero illegally arrested Mr. Gray.
Mosby also blamed the police officers for ignoring Gray's repeated pleas for medical help. Joining us now from Atlanta is Cedric Alexander. He's the president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. He's also a key member of President Obama's task force on 21st century policing. And Tom Fuentes is joining us as well. He's our CNN law enforcement analyst, the former FBI assistant director. Mark Morial, the president of the National Urban League, is still with us as well. He's in New York. We're all going to get reaction to the mayor when she makes her statement. But Cedric, first to you, were you surprised what you heard from the state's attorney today?
Well, first of all, I certainly did not expect anything so quickly, but obviously they had what they needed in order to make a decision. And you know, the process is what the process is, Wolf. And I'm quite sure that she and her staff had to sit down and look at that evidence over and over and over in order to come up with those charges in which they feel they can proceed in a court of law on. So, yes, I was surprised that it was as quick as it was, but, you know, the system, the process is exactly what the process is. So that's due process under American law.
It certainly is, and she was impressive in her statement. Tom Fuentes, as you know, she also went out of her way to say she has her own independent investigators looking into all this. She wasn't simply relying on what the Baltimore Police Department was telling her.
No, Wolf, but it sounds like a very coordinated investigation. You have Baltimore police in the beginning saying that they were dedicating 50 detectives to the investigation. Then you have the Baltimore County Police, probably another 50 or more detectives, and then you have investigators that are already assigned to most states' attorneys' offices who are either retired police officers or they're detailed over from another agency. So really, you have a small task force of, not small, a pretty large task force of officers working on this case from the beginning and working diligently to make this happen so quickly.
Mark Morial, what do you think the mayor now needs to say? As you know, she's come under some criticism over the past few days, but what do you think she needs to say now, reacting to what the state's attorney has done, the indictment of these 6 police officers?
I mean, I think she should support the actions of the state's attorney and continue to reassert the need for this community to unify and come together and move forward. I think it's certainly important that she signal her dual responsibility to keep the peace and protect the continuation of peaceful protests. But I think there's going to be a point very soon where there needs to be a pivot towards fixing the overall problems of the Baltimore Police Department, because Freddie Gray's unfortunate death and these charges are symptomatic of a broader problem with the Baltimore Police Department. And her charge and the commissioner's charge and the city council's charge and the community's charge is to work to fix and reform the Baltimore Police Department. So I don't know if she should address that today, but I think in the near future, I think that is what is important, because that, I believe...
All right, hold on a second, Mark, because the mayor is about to speak.
I have said from the beginning that no one is above the law in our city. I was sickened and heartbroken by the statement of charges that we heard today, because no one in our city is above the law. Justice must apply to all of us equally. With today's official indictment, I have ordered Police Commissioner Batts to utilize the full extent of his legal authority and immediately suspend all officers facing felony charges. In fact, warrants have been executed and 5 officers are in custody. We know that the vast majority of the men and the women in the Baltimore City Police Department serve our city with pride, with courage, with honor, and with distinction. But to those of you who wish to engage in brutality, misconduct, racism, and corruption, let me be clear, there is no place in the Baltimore City Police Department for you. Today's indictments are the next step in the legal process that is running its course. And as mayor, I will continue to be relentless in changing the culture of the police department to ensure that everyone in our city is treated equally under the law. There will be justice for Mr. Gray, there will be justice for his family, and there will be justice for the people of Baltimore. Thank you.
Mayor, no question. A short statement from Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake. She's not answering reporters' questions right now, but she's certainly expressing her solidarity with the state's attorney, Marilyn Mosby. Your quick reaction, let's get some reaction to what we just heard. First, Mark Morial, the president of the National Urban League.
It was positive to hear her send a message to the remainder of the Baltimore Police Department and state that she will not tolerate brutality, corruption, racism, or any of the ill practices that created the climate under which Mr. Gray lost his life. I think that was a very important thing for her to say today, because it means that the steps that are necessary, that are going to be necessary in the future, Wolf, to repair the Baltimore Police Department and unify the community, I think she sent a signal that she's prepared to take those steps today. Her sense of disappointment and outrage that these public servants, these officers who've been sworn to protect and serve, are now facing criminal charges. I think it was important for her to say that, but it was a forceful statement, it was a short statement, and I think it's best that she did not take questions so that there could be focus on exactly what she said.
Cedric Alexander, she said 5 of those 6 police officers indicted today are now in police custody. I don't know about the 6th police officer. I assume he or she will be relatively soon. She said she was sickened and heartbroken when she heard the charges being leveled today by Marilyn Mosby, the state's attorney. Your reaction to what we just heard?
Well, I found the mayor's statement very strong, very bold, and of course very sincere. And not only did I hear her statement, Wolf, I felt her statement as well, too. It was short, it was right to the point, and what she clearly made reference to me, as I interpret it, she's about fairness for every citizen in that community, not some citizens, all citizens. And that was a remarkable, very short, pointed, and very strong and well-felt statement made by that mayor. And it just speaks to her leadership.
Well, let me see if we can get some reaction from the streets of Baltimore. John Berman is on the streets of Baltimore right now. The mayor, you just heard John saying 5 of those 6 police officers who have been charged in connection with the death of Freddie Gray, they're now in police custody. What's the mood over there? What's the reaction on the streets?
You know, it's interesting. This mayor has been criticized from both sides politically. She's been trying to manage the city as the person in charge, as a manager, but she is also an elected official, a politician. And early in the week, Wolf, she was criticized for not being quick enough in her response. Later in the week, she was criticized for calling the people who participated in the riots thugs. Today, what you saw is a mayor, I think, trying to get her legs under her to move forward in the coming days, to make a decisive statement that the city will not stand for the kind of action that these police officers have been charged with, but trying also to move forward and set expectations for what will happen next. She said she's sickened. She said she's heartbroken. She said they'll be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. It was very interesting to see because she's been having a difficult time calibrating her public appearances, and I think this appearance was designed to close the book a little bit on those difficulties. I'm joined right now by Brandon Scott, City Councilman, correct? Councilor, I don't know if you just had a chance to hear the mayor make that statement. What's your reaction?
My reaction is that the mayor, as always, is saying what she should be saying and moving forward. We know that now that the wheels of justice and the wheels of the law are now out of the city's hands, and as far as the executive branch, and now it's in the judicial branch. We have a wonderful new state's attorney, and she's going to do the job that she was elected to do. So that's my immediate thoughts. And then I often say that for me, and I know the mayor feels the same way, no matter, I say all the time, and I continue to say, anyone who unjustly takes someone's life in the city of Baltimore should meet the fullest extent of the law, no matter who it is.
And they are facing now the judicial process. The president has called for due process and said these officers now deserve due process. Yes. 5 of them are in custody. I imagine the 6th one will be in custody sometime very, very soon. What do you expect to see in the coming days? The Police Officers Union has actually called for a special prosecutor to take over the case.
Yeah, I think that first they do deserve, look, they're just like everyone else, they deserve due process, and folks have to give them an understanding that they are police officers, but they're also American citizens, so they have to have a process as well. Moving forward, we're expecting stuff like that. Lawyers are going to be lawyers, right? We know the legal process, we know the wheels of justice and how they're going to be motions and things going forward, and that's just what we should expect in the city. What folks have to do is, I've been saying all day long, folks have to understand that this is not justice nor injustice. The folks that are angry or the folks that are happy have to come to the middle and realize that this is the infancy stages of this process, and moving forward, this process will play itself out, but today it's not a place for finality. This is just the beginning.
You said lawyers have to be lawyers, leaders have to be leaders, yep. Which means as people like you. So what are you going to do now to talk to the people in this community, people who say that the system has been rigged against them, to tell them that they need to trust now in this process as it moves forward?
Well, what I'll do is what I've always been doing. This week, I amped up my school visits to talk to young kids about this process and educate them about this process. But I'm going to continue to be vigilant and being active and telling them, listen, the system is a system. We have to trust the system. Yes, there are things in our system that have to be changed, but that change is not going to come overnight. That change is not going to be just about this instance. That change is going to take policy change. That change is going to take citizen involvement. That change is going to take pressure and things that are beyond the powers of City Hall. That's something in our city that we have to understand. And they actually, what really needs to be talked about in this country is that these issues are nationwide, and we're going to have to start talking about it at a national level and not just at a city or local or a state level, because this is something that is impacting the entire United States of America, rural and cities across our country.
Councilman, we'll let you get back out there with your constituents. It's going to be a busy afternoon, and I think a peaceful afternoon. We've seen peace on the street, so thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Wolf?
All right, John, stand by. Our own Don Lemon has just had an interview with the other passenger in that police van, the other individual who was arrested. We're going to hear what that person had to say to Don Lemon. We'll take a quick break. Much more right after this.
One woman has dedicated her life